In this post, we're going to focus on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic beloved Congresswoman. Not as much on in general aspects, but we're going to focus on healthcare. This specifically because I saw one of her events on her being on a panel where she was trying to ask questions, and she basically couldn't even understand some basic things on healthcare. She was basically told that the government is investing money in healthcare, and that the people are not receiving money from that healthcare. But these advances in healthcare are still going to companies. And she was wondering why people can't get investments back in that money. Well, the fact is, with it, is she couldn't identify the fact that this is crony capitalism. She instead, with it, goes, well, can't we just adopt a system where this happens? Well, they do this thing in the United Kingdom in certain cases, but the fact is as we see with the United Kingdom, this causes massive, in their system for treatments, it causes huge delays, and it causes them to ration health care. Now, if she knew some of the background on it, she would have known that, and known when you have a total government healthcare takeover that this is what happens. But she couldn't even recognize that basic fact. She was so this is point number one that we're going to make on this, that when she's on this committee, that this is one of the things that she couldn't notice. Now, instead of actually advocating for the total elimination of this money that she's calling an investment, which is really not investment, it's crony capitalism, where the taxpayer is paying for free research for these actual private companies, and these private companies that are only the certain privileged ones are getting access to, and other ones are left out in the cold. That this allows them to essentially get a leg up on any of the problems that come in with drug research. They're essentially getting free drug research just for being a specialized company. This is that whole problem with big pharmaceuticals. If you basically donate enough money to the certain candidates, such as we talked in the previous one, like Cory Booker, you can get into one of these programs and get essentially free drug research paid for by the taxpayer, and you get essentially what comes out, and you can essentially profit from these without any investing at the first place on these drugs. All you have to do is continue the investment once these things come out, and that's not much for these companies, and they can reap a huge profit. Then you have the next part, which is that she neglects to note, which is she was pointing out on the VA. Now, this is another major problem that she doesn't notice. When it comes to the actual point of the VA, she was stating that how come the VA can have drug prices up to 31% lower than the average consumer? And the person explained because they're able to negotiate as a large group. And she was totally ignored the fact that that this was because it was a large group and not because it was government. She still thinks that it's actually the role of the government to do this. When you add bureaucracy onto it, it's not going to give you benefits. In fact, if you actually reduce the amount of bureaucracy, the actual gain on the actual drug prices could actually be even better. This is why when you have the idea that Rand Paul suggested to Donald Trump to actually have these large associations in which were signed by executive order and could actually be made into law if the Democrats would work with Republicans to make it a law by actually cooperating in the congressional bodies. We could actually make this into an actual law to where we can actually have these large group insurance plans that actually totally eliminate the need for such things as the ACA or even going anywhere close to universal health care. Now, if we adopt this, we wouldn't have to go toward that idea, and this would allow these large groups to have much better plans than they would as buying an individual from the market as we have now, or even before when there wasn't the massive regulations on it from this. And when you have this allows them to actually purchase at a much lower rate because you're buying in bulk. And that's the whole idea. And this is something that she frankly didn't understand. It was going completely over her head. And if she's supposedly coming from the idea of an economics major, she should understand when you're buying in larger sums, this is where prices go down. This is why when people buy medication, why they give you breaks in what they call maintenance medication, which is buying in usually 3-month sums, as opposed to being in shorter sums, being as low as a couple of days to a week to even a month. If you're buying in a maintenance medication amount, they're going to give you a much better break. And this is why insurance companies want you on that, because if you're buying in bulk, they can get the bulk rate of it, and they end up saving you more money because they're saving more money as well, because the purchase cost is much lower because you're buying more through them because they're buying more. So they're essentially paying less per pill. And this is something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not understand the basic idea of. And it's something that's really is a sad fact that she can't understand. And this is where we get this disconnect between people who believe in universal health care and people who actually believe in a fully free market, where you get these large groups. If you get the large groups, you actually reduce the actual cost because it eliminates the idea of your insurance plan ending at a border of a state. When you eliminate that whole point, it makes it a lot easier, such as what you're going to find with what are ideally like federal plans. Federal plans are really nothing special. It's just a matter of there's a huge amount of people in that plan that allows them to actually buy at these large levels. And this is what we're finding with these plans that are much different. And that actually happens to be one of the plans that I'm under because I'm on disability, and it's actually my father's plan that's a family plan. So because I'm on disability, I'm actually on it for life, so I end up getting those benefits, as opposed to me having to go with one of these individual plans, which is really horrible, because I'm paying based on a person of essentially a full group of one. I'm actually now in an extremely large group, and a plan size of 3, and a whole group of essentially thousands of people. And this is what makes it much easier to deal with, as opposed to going into a plan that's much smaller. There would essentially be a group size at best of if they allowed the same type of situation, a group size of 3 and a family of 3. This is assuming that they would allow the same situation, which they actually don't. And actually the plan cost would actually be much higher, and the outcome would actually be, the outcome of a plan would be much worse going through the actual markets. And that this is why we get much of a difference. And you'll actually see when you're able to actually have these groups negotiate from these large bulk areas, they're going to have a lot more leverage. And this is the whole idea of having the leverage to be able to do this. And if when you see this, you're going to see that this is the main idea. It's not, and you're not going to have the leverage when you put a lot of bureaucracy, because the fact is there's going to be more people to pay in between, which is going to raise the cost right back up. And what ends up happening is when you're not petitioning against this stuff, they're going to say which drugs are necessary, which drugs aren't. And well, if your drugs that are necessary aren't on that list, guess what? You have to either A, pay full price, or B, you don't get those drugs. And to a lot of people on lower incomes, that means they don't get those drugs and they're going to die. And this is the sad fact on a single payer or universal healthcare system. And this is what is never discussed. And that's where you get what is called healthcare rationing. They're going to ration out certain drugs. They're also going to ration out certain amounts of actual care, because the fact is care is expensive. And because the fact is there's going to be a huge bureaucracy, they're not going to essentially eliminate the bureaucracy because they want to hire more and more people for this, because they're going to have more and more people in the bureaucracy than they actually do for the care. This is why you have this. And beyond that, there's actual ethical points where this enforcement of what they're actually doing from the single payer is actually wrong, because you're enforcing these doctors to accept certain rates that are essentially not allowing them to run a business freely as they would normally. They're essentially doing it under penalty of law if they want to essentially work. And this is why a lot of doctors and such have actually become working in these governments. They've actually worked outside of it and actually say, well, I'll take this amount of money from you for a year and give you care, and it will be without insurance, and I'll give you care during this. And then what they'll do is they'll have a network of so many consumers that will do this, and they will come to their home and give them care as actually a general practitioner, or they'll actually start to bring up networks of doctors like this. And this is what is starting to happen in a lot of these countries with this. And we've even seen, for the fact is, what's happened in some of these countries with universal healthcare is they've allowed medical tourism, which is essentially going to a country with actual free markets medical care, and actually allowed these people to come in. And what ends up happening is there's a charge back to the universal healthcare system from whatever the actual cost of the medical care is in that other country. We're seeing that, such as in Canada. The actual there's actually been legal cases for the initially for the refusal of this, and once they realized that it was actually against the human rights to refuse this because of the rationing of healthcare, they essentially decided that we're gonna have to pay these costs when we start rationing healthcare because of the limitation of doctors. And that's where we see that. So this is where, so if the United States goes in that direction, you're going to find that this is going to really limit a market that has actually been quite lucrative for the United States, of people coming in just for the idea of getting surgeries or getting health care where where these other countries' universal healthcare system has failed them. And it would actually take a lot of money out of the economy of the United States. And that's the whole idea of where we're at. So if you want an actual better system, it's to actually enlarge the ability of groups. You don't want to force coverage on people. You want people to actually get it voluntarily, and the way we do that is by increasing what types of groups can get coverage. This means basically saying whatever types of groups you have. If it's the NRA, if it's a political group you are affiliated with, if it's some whatever buyers club you're affiliated with, if it's some professional group you're affiliated with, make all these available to get insurance, regardless of what it would be now with it. So this would extend the ability for these groups to get insurance. We don't want to eliminate that, and this is where the disconnect between the Democrats and other people are. They don't understand that this is how you make insurance and healthcare costs cheaper. You don't make it cheaper by actually just taking people's choice away. Eliminating choice would actually cause a huge spike in cost, especially in this country, because when you have these countries with single payer, nothing actually gets produced, because it ends up being something where there's no actual legitimate reason to produce within that country, because there's actual caps on how much you can make, how much you can charge because of that, and what you can actually make. Once you do that, it essentially becomes not very lucrative within that state to produce it, and they go elsewhere. And you'll actually find within those countries there's limited numbers of drugs that come out of those, and the countries that don't have single payer are usually the ones that are producing more drugs. So if we want to essentially create a system to where countries that do have a free healthcare system are producing more drugs, then that's the easiest way to do it. We'll actually be essentially killing our economy by doing that. All of our medical care and medical device development is going to leave the United States within about a year if we do universal health care. And it'll be based on pretty much stupidity from the actual politicians and selling a bill of goods that really people don't understand. They don't understand you're actually buying rationed health care. You're actually buying less and spending a lot more for it, because the only thing you're guaranteeing is a bunch of bureaucrats get jobs, and you're getting horrible health care for it. You're waiting longer in the emergency room, because what's going to happen is essentially just like if you guaranteed everyone a car of whatever car they wanted, everybody's going to go for the most expensive car. This is what happens when it comes to healthcare. They're not even going to go to the regular doctor. They're just going to go straight to the emergency room, because they're just going to say, hey, take care of me. And they're going to go straight to the hospital, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. They're not going to go to the clinics. They're not going to go to anything like that. And even when you have these clinics, what's going to happen, clinics and doctors, they're going to limit their time working, because those are usually more expensive in actually per visit than it would actually cost for the actual run for the actual hospital. So it's going to cause basically those places to be running short time, and they're not going to be able to do as much for the people. So people are just going to go straight to the hospital no matter what they have, whether it's a little cold or it's a broken arm, and it's going to cause people with situations like broken arms and such to essentially wait 10, 12 hours. There could be people with severe back injuries and bullet wounds and God knows what, and this would essentially just make our waits in these cities 2 to 3 to 4 times later. I mean, you could have a compound fracture in just even in Canada, and you could be waiting up to 10 or 12 hours in the emergency room because they have a situation of their universal health care. Now, if you went to the United States, you're gonna be waiting less than an hour for that. And this is going to be the difference. You shouldn't be waiting half a day for something like a compound fracture where the bone's poking through the skin. And sorry to be a little bit gruesome with that, but that's the case. And this is where we have it. I mean, we shouldn't be getting to the point of rationing health, of going with the system that's going to ration healthcare just because we made promises that we couldn't keep. And that's what's happening on the liberal side. The liberal side doesn't view the actual consequences of what they're offering. They just say, here's what we want to offer. We want to be like the other guys. Well, they don't look at what the negative consequences are. They don't look at, when it comes to these individuals, everybody has these own little needs that they have. This person's going to need this medication. That person's going to need that medication. This person's going to need this medication. And it's not always going to fit to the whole thing. And we can't, as a country, offer every single medication being paid for. Because if we did, the actual cost would basically be more than the actual budget we have that we're actually bringing in currently. Even if we didn't do their whole idea of a free idea of college that some of these socialists want, you're still going to use up the whole entire budget. This means we're not paying our loans, we're not paying anything else. That means essentially we would still have to do all these other things. If we start adding on just their idea of being able to pay for everything else, like pay for the idea of just paying for the actual loans we currently have out, eliminate all of our other programs, just pay for this universal health care, and pay for the idea of college, and pay for the current loans we have out, we essentially would have to double all of our tax rates. This means that every current person is going to have to pay double of what they have right now. And this is one thing you're going to find that people like Bernie Sanders, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and all the people like that are not going to want to discuss. They don't want to discuss this because when it comes down to the financial points, it's something that becomes very, very dangerous for their campaign. When you tell people, hey, we're going to offer you this little tiny bit extra, but you're going to have to pay twice as much, that thing that sounds like it's free isn't exactly free. It's not free at all. It's just a whole big bunch. It's just adding a little bit of a perk, and you're paying twice as much currently as you are in taxes to get it. And it's going to put a lot of people in the poorhouse, because when you're telling businesses they need to spend twice as much, that means when you buy goods in the store, it's going to cost you twice as much. When you're spending, let's say, $1.50 a pound for tomatoes, it's now $3 a pound. And guess what? It's going to cost you to spend a lot more in the pocketbook. The cars are going to cost more, because especially with these Green New Deal that's going to make everyone buy a electric car within 12 years that they want. You're talking, there is no electric car that's under $30,000. No person out there that's on meager means can afford a $30,000 car. I don't know where this Nimrod is living, but she can't understand the fact that people can't afford a $30,000 car out just at a drop of a hat. This isn't even going with a hybrid. This is saying a fully electric car. It's also saying that we can't use any type of fossil fuels for heating. We have to use some type of form of wind and solar and hydroelectric. Basically, that's not going to heat a home. If you go into these northern cities, people are going to die. I mean, and this is this person that we're looking at that is not even thinking about how healthcare works. She doesn't even understand the actual intricacies of where the actual money goes. When she was actually brought with the idea of how to cut crony capitalism, her idea is, let's see if we can get people to get a little bit of money back on it. Instead of, hey, let's actually eliminate this and let's stop this program and let's end the crony capitalism to begin with, because this shouldn't exist. This is not the government's job. And let's stop these privileged companies. That should be her job out there. Instead, she's saying, oh, let's find a way to get some people some money from this. No, you know what's going to happen is they're going to find a way to basically get the most privileged people money. She even states that the only billionaires she respects are people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. These are the two people who are basically the biggest recipients of corporate welfare. If we're going to essentially state that you hate billionaires and you hate most billionaires but you like other ones, well, the fact is why do you like billionaires that are basically guilty of taking corporate welfare? Shouldn't it be the fact that you like billionaires that have actually not taken corporate welfare? Because if you're taking corporate welfare, you should be essentially an enemy of the actual little person, because you're essentially taking their money that they've actually earned, so that you can basically earn more money with it, and essentially you've been guilty of theft. We should not be glorifying theft just because you say, hey, this guy donates to the Democratic Party. Yeah, you know whose money he's donating? He's donating the money of that little guy who basically is trying to live week to week. Just because he's a big name. These people are basically stealing money essentially through this corporate welfare. And that's all this is. They're getting corporate welfare through both quantitative easing, which is basically loose monetary policies, and they're getting corporate welfare of basically handouts. And then anytime they basically do a EPA violation, they basically will give them a slap on the wrist. $100,000 fine, $500,000 in corporate welfare. This is the way things work. You'll also see them be very, very positive of people that are more people that are billionaires that are actually donating to the party, especially ones that don't even pay into the taxation system but get huge checks back. Why are we actually benefiting them? If you don't pay into the taxation system, you really shouldn't be getting anything back. The whole thing is, if you don't pay anything in, you shouldn't be getting anything out. The fact is, you should be actually left alone. Essentially, it should be an a la carte service system, as close as we can get. But the fact is we're not going to do that, because then you're going to have people who oppose interventionist policies who are not going to pay for the military, and they would never allow that one in a million years. And the fact is the only time people will actually oppose Ocasio-Cortez is on the fact is when she has opposition of Israel, and that's only because the fact is both parties are bought out by the Israel lobbies. And the fact is if this is your only problem with her, then you really have some serious issues. Because the fact is she has some serious flaws in her ideas, and if your only problem with her is that she basically opposes this lobby, even though her logic is flawed on it, she at least has a good idea of something that's going on. She might not be able to recognize it, but because she doesn't exactly have the most well-cited awareness, as we've cited here, but at least she's able to recognize that something's going on. And I'd at least give her some pluses with that one. But yet the whole media wants to attack her on that, both on the right and the left. And this is because there is a whole big point that they want to state anybody who attacks Israel is anti-Semitic. Well, the fact is, it's not about anti-Semitism. It's actually about what's actually going in and out of the country, and do we really view them as actual allies? And being that she's actually one of the few that's actually questioned them, I would actually give her a plus with that one. But she really needs to actually examine and actually look at the issues first, and not just tend to spout out stuff. She needs to actually look at the issues instead of just parroting a lot of what's going around her. And if she starts doing that, she can be a lot more effective. And if she actually looks at the issues, she can actually be a lot more effective. But it's going to eventually cause her to have to start questioning her own ideas. And that will actually be very destructive to the Democratic Party, because she's eventually going to get to the point to where she would have to question the idea of socialism and come up with the idea that it would be better off to have these large partnerships with people for healthcare than it would for the idea of a universal healthcare system, because it would actually benefit the people better. For the actual price of drugs, for the prices of healthcare, and for the actual money that goes into their wallet. And realize that billionaires aren't necessarily the enemy. It's the actual people who are actually taking money from the actual people who are the enemy. And once she actually realizes that, I think she'll be a lot more effective. And it's not that I have any ill will toward her. It's just that I feel that she's very, very naive, and she's not exactly the brightest brick in the wall when it comes to issues themselves. Now, for the Democrats that are probably going to hate this, I'm just telling the truth as is, and it's just a fact. You can think that she's smart, but the fact is she's not showing that she has any type of intelligence skills whatsoever, because there are some blatant things that she could have easily pointed out to date, and she has completely lacked any type of ability to articulate these. And until she actually articulates these things that are actually right in front of her, she's really showing that she's not that bright to begin with. I mean, you're talking that when the bar is being set so low with people like Maxine Waters, I mean, I can understand where you're going to say she sounds smart, but the fact is when you get people of that low caliber of intelligence from the Democratic side, you're going to assume that she looks smart. But she's not exactly anywhere close to more intelligent individuals like a Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Ron Paul, and others of that sort, when these people can basically run rings around her and really know exactly what's going on in the world. And that's really going to be a problem for her to be able to keep up with them. But she's essentially going to have to get up to that point to really make some meaningful changes out there. Otherwise, she's just going to be essentially a meme later on down the road, as if she hasn't been already. Now, I hope you'll like this video. If you do, like it, subscribe, and I will see you later for my next and third installment tonight. See you guys later. Bye.